Hey everyone, welcome back to the Chessyard. This is Ne5 and I'll be playing the final blitz today on Lee Chess. Let's get started and see how it goes. Got the white pieces, so we'll start with d4. Try to play the London system. If you're not familiar with it, I'll just paste the link of the London system I have explained in one of my previous videos. Bishop to f4, developing the dark square bishop first against this variation. I think you should first start off with e3 and then develop the knight. Um, Bishop trying to pin the knight. Developing the other knight to f3. Not going for the exchange, but planting the knight on e5, a very important square in the London system. I think I can win a pawn here. But that spoils my pawn structure as well if I take. I don't know. Oh, that's fine. I can take on his rook if he doesn't. Now I can take on the dark square bishop. Bishop sits good on b5. He takes. I can take back with the queen. I have to make sure my bishop is guarded. So queen came up here. I have to take the pawn. After he takes, retrieve the knight. A bit complicated so far. The pawn is vulnerable here. He's doing a lot of stuff here. Just retrieving the bishop makes more sense. I don't know. Let's get the bishop back. He can take on the b pawn. Yep, that's what he does. Here, I think I should castle immediately. I can take on the pawn. He's threatening mate. Yep, g3. I have to stop this. Now the queen comes over to h5. Doesn't. What move do I have here? Can I exchange the rooks? Makes sense. He takes, I take back. He sacks a piece. Is it worth? We'll get to find out. What is the comeback? I don't think there's a follow-up move from here. Now, if he moves the rook, I can take on. The bishop is protecting the knight. He moves the queen. Threatening to give check from here so that he can take on the rook. How about rook pinning the bishop? He takes on the pawn. Can I take on the pawn with the queen? He takes. I take the bishop. That's last rank weakness. That would be good to see. Exploiting the last rank weakness, because if he takes the queen, I take the bishop with a check. He has to retrieve the knight and the rook, and then I take back, and it's a mate in the last rank. That was a nice move. Now the plan would be, if he saves this, which he would, to attack with the queen on the bishop. Couple of pieces attacking the bishop. He gives a check. I thought so. Can I just move my king? He gives another check. Oh, he doesn't. But tries to save up everything. Now comes knight to d4, attacking the queen. Okay. What move do I have here? Okay, let's play a bit fast. Queen attacking the pawn. Some threat check, made threats. Coming back. Guarding the rook. I have to make sure that there's some kind of an attack happening on the pawn. Let's get the rook out of there. Not pretty useful. He takes, I take back. Planting the knight in between. Let's give a check. He has to take. No. Oh, he loses the queen. And everything. Mate. Phew, that was nice. And a good attack at the end. Went through with it. Whew, was close again. 7 seconds on the clock remaining. Let's analyze the game once. Playing a strong player as well. And that should be my highest rating ever. 1935. Feels good. Let's analyze the game. So d4, d5, and square 4. He plays c5 here. So c5 is very tricky to handle in London system. So probably I didn't play the theory right here. I'll just cross check it later on. He develops the knight to c6. I develop the knight to c3. He plays knight f6, and white is in some serious advantage. Oh, I couldn't. I had to jump on with the knight. Yep, this was good. Missed it. So went with the bishop to b5. He plays e6. Played knight f3. He offers bishop exchange, which I deny. And then he castles. And here I had to capture with the bishop first. Okay, but I went there and took on the pawn. He hangs his dark square bishop. I take, retrieving the bishop. He takes the center pawn. I had to make a choice here to take with the pawn or the queen. I chose queen over the pawn. And he takes advantage of that fact by moving the pawn forward to e5. Here, the idea of retrieving to the a4 was if I go somewhere else, say here, my bishop is not protected once he moves the pawn forward. I have to take away my knight from the game. And as soon as I move my knight, my bishop would be hanging. So trying to save that, going to a4, he moves the pawn forward. I capture, he knight to e2. And computer is suggesting that black is pretty much comfortable here, 2.7 ahead in the game already. Here he moves queen to e5, giving some space for my bishop, which I take back now to d3, and game has started to turn into white's favor here. He takes on the pawn and gives me opportunity to castle. That's what I do here. He gets in with the knight. I could have moved g4, but I played pawn to g3. Yes, I was expecting queen on h5, but then I could have met with it with h4. So he gets his rook on d8, and I try to exchange the rooks so that my rook gets on the access to the open file, the B file. He sacks a piece here that was probably very bad for him. Yes, computer suggesting that there's no follow-up, as I said during the game as well. So I took on the knight, but he tries to create some pressure, give a check with the queen, and then trying to make sure that he captures my rook after he goes to gives me a check from h1. I move my king up. There's no other option. The knight cannot defend it. So after I go up, my rook would be hanging. So that was his plan. So I made sure that I'm pinning his bishop, which never got developed in the game. So I got my rook to b8. Here he gives a check. I go up, saving my king. He captures on the h2. I capture the pawn on d4. Threatening, and that was a nice tactic I explained during the game as well, that if you capture the queen, I capture the bishop, it's mate in two from there, and he has to go back the last rank weakness because all the three pawns are on their original position, haven't given space for the king to move. Otherwise the king would have got a square to retrieve, but there's no other option. So I took on the pawn, and then just trying to create some pressure on the bishop. He gives a check. Okay, I thought of defending it with the knight, but the problem I was thinking was he can come back and give a check. And what is the savior then? Because after I move, he gets to eat the pawn as well. But yeah, okay, then I was winning. If he takes the pawn, I'm winning by just capturing the piece, and he cannot take back. Okay. Here he gives another check. I get the knight in between. He's trying to maneuver his pieces. I tried to exploit the weakness of h7. Bishop is already targeting the h7. That was the part. So he plays c6 there. I get back my queen, defending the knight, the rook as well. He's trying to now offer attack the knight if I move my queen away. So I can't. I take it back on c4. Just playing around with the pieces. Got my rook back just to make sure that I can use it in the game, but missed that. He was having a bishop which eyed on the diagonal. Now, there was a lot of time pressure when I was on this point of time. They were like 26 seconds on the clock. He had close to 1 minute, so double the time. So I went ahead with that. I just moved the pawn forward. He takes the rook. I take back with the pawn. He tries to take my queen out of the picture, defend with the knight. He moves the pawn to a6. I give him a check, and he misses that his queen was hanging. So I took the queen, and suppose he takes the queen here instead of going back. The idea was after I have a couple of pieces here against the rook, so that's sort of an equal position. I would say. Yep, computer also suggesting it's 0-0, and probably one of the pawns, the c pawn, is can be a bit deadly if he's not careful over there, and can be converted to the queen very quickly. So yeah, things were on track even if he didn't do the blunder. He gives away the queen and then tries to just take on the knight, trying to win on time. I took the queen, I took his rook, and then the pawn as well, making some space for my pawn now, and just moving the pawn forward, not thinking anything else. Oh, it was mate in one if I play queen to e5, but I wasn't focusing on what he's moving. My idea was just to try to push the pawn forward, get the other queen in the game. There's no reason to save the game from there. So just trying to play on time, trying to create some threats, aligning both the queens. Of course, he had pawn moves remaining with him, so there was no chance of stalemate, and that's what I took advantage of and did a checkmate eventually on the 52nd move of the game, with 7 seconds remaining on the clock. As always, very close. I hope you like the game. London system is pretty much solid, but against the move c5, it is somehow gets tricky. Otherwise, London system is a very good opening, can be controlled very nice. And even if you see after the opening, the game was in control. Just that I missed a couple of moves in between and made a bit of a mess out of it. But thankfully, I converted it into a victory eventually. I hope you like the video. Please do let me know your comments and try out the London system. I am pretty much confident that you will get some good results with it. Thank you so much for your time. Take care. Bye bye.